Hey, what's up all you amazing people? It's May. I am back. Today's gonna be a little bit of a different video. It's not super upbeat or cheery, so I apologize in advance. I think that it's important to make these type of videos though, because even if it's uncomfortable and it's not, it's life. Life's not always going to be happy. Life's not always going to be easy and comfortable. And I'm hoping that by sharing my story, I can make someone else's life a little easier, more comfortable, and give them an opportunity to learn from my mistakes. So let's just jump right in. 3 or 4 years ago, I had just been initiated into a hospital program to prevent myself from killing myself. It wasn't a good time for anything, for anyone, and that was remotely close to me. My mom obviously was distraught. I know my friends were worried because they didn't really know what was going on. I was scared. It was the first time I had been put into basically suicide watch at a hospital, and so I was not in a good state of mind. So prior to my hospitalization, I had been talking to this one guy. We had met because he was working at the Starbucks right by my house. He was the barista, and we were kind of chit-chatting, and one thing led to another, and because I was in the hospital for about a week, I wasn't sure when I was going to be released. But at the time, I was, kind of lonely. There were other patients there, but I wanted to see my friends, and then I wanted just outside comfort from people. And he agreed to come hang out with me at the hospital when visiting hours were a thing. And so we started hanging out kind of, not every day, but from that point on, he would see me at least once every other day at the hospital, and then when I was released, we started seeing each other a lot more. So he and I started dating really fast. I'm not really sure, I don't remember the exact time we made it official between the two of us, but we eventually became boyfriend, girlfriend, there were definitely red flags that I don't even remember if I noticed, but there were definitely early red flags in that relationship that in hindsight I really wish that I'd picked up on, or even if I had already picked up on them, if I had gone with my gut, just said, this is not going to end up well. Like most relationships, there are different stages to how comfortable you become with that person, and what rate you become comfortable with that person. So I don't know, some people call it the honeymoon phase, some people call it puppy love phase, where you're just infatuated by everything and you want to be with them 24/7, and no matter what happens, even the things that kind of piss you off, you just set aside because you're like, you know what, it's a new relationship, and I'm sure I do things that gonna annoy you too, so we're just gonna set it aside. So the honeymoon phase between me and this guy did not last very long at all. It's hard to remember specific details prior to the biggest outbursts we had, just because they seem so minor compared to what happened after we reached maybe 7-8 months together. So I'll skip, the little minor details, but, eventually there were just a lot of problems between the two of us in the relationship. There was a lot of wrong things in the relationship that were just causing us to break up and then get back together. And you know, sometimes that happens. Sometimes it happens between couples where they break up and for one reason or another, and then they get back together, and then, you know, things are better. Unfortunately for me, when my boyfriend at the time and I would get back together, things just kind of were good for about a day, maybe. And then they would just go downhill from that point on. So I think where the relationship really started taking a turn for the worst was at one point we had broken up, and he was very adamant on telling me how he didn't want me at all. He didn't want to deal with me anymore, and he was, you know, very solid on the idea that we were going to break up and it was going to be the end for it all. And while I was distraught about it, I was also, you know, I was feeling a little bit of relief, because part of me was like, okay, well, now I don't have to worry about being controlled the way you were controlling me. So he and I broke up, and not knowing that we were going to get back together, I made the decision to, you know, just have a little fling with somebody. And he and I get back together, and he questions me about what happened when he and I were not together. You know, he's like, well, what did you do when we weren't together? And I'm like, well, you know, I hung out with somebody. And he goes, well, what did you do with that person? And I disclosed to him what happened. And at that point, he just got furious. He got angry, and he started calling me a bunch of names. So let me back up a little bit. At this point, I was not talking to any of my friends because he was convinced that they were, you know, going to be bad influences on me. And I think in hindsight, that was him realizing that he was treating me horribly, and I was too close to the situation to realize what was going on. And if someone else were to see what was happening, they would tell me to get out. And he liked to have the control and power over me. So he didn't want anyone else telling me what to do other than him. At this point, I had also barely spoken to my parents, my family, for the same reason, you know, the isolation of him being the one person I can depend on, regardless of how he treated me. So he and I got into an argument when he found out that I had a fling with somebody when he and I were broken up. He started calling me a whore and a slut, and you know, those words don't sit well with anybody. I'm particularly sensitive to those words because of various reasons. But, you know, it was bad enough that he's calling me these derogatory names and he's yelling at me, but he decided to pull in his brothers. He has two brothers that are younger than him, and he decided to pull them into the situation, points at me and say, that right there is a whore. And at that point, I lost it. And I just slapped him across the face, and I left his house. So eventually, time passed, and he and I ended up getting back together. And, you know, it wasn't just because I was still isolated from my friends and family. It was because a lot of the things he had said to me got under my skin. It was like, I felt I didn't deserve to feel any better than I did. It felt like what he was giving me was the best I would get, and I should be thankful, grateful for what I was getting, because at that point I didn't see myself as deserving anything else. So I was back to square one. You know, I'm stuck in this relationship and I don't have outlets because I don't have my friends to talk to. He would control my phone. He would take it with him to work because he was afraid that I would be texting people behind his back and then just deleting the messages or blocking them so they couldn't respond by the time he got home. So I didn't have my phone to contact other people. So I was very isolated. I was very, stuck. And like in hindsight, there were so many things that I could have done and I should have done. And yet I didn't. And I don't even really know why, other than just the fact that it felt like I didn't deserve happiness. I didn't deserve to be safe. It's just how, the words, if you hear something enough times, eventually it just becomes part of your own beliefs. And that is exactly what happens. So by this time, he had long quit his job at Starbucks and was only working as like a food delivery person for DoorDash. And part of the reason, I think, was because he could take me with him on the driving hours that he did, and that gave him more security to know that, hey, I'm not going to be cheating on him. Even though if he were to be gone at Starbucks working, he would take my phone with him and leave me his, or sometimes he would just take both phones and I would just be stuck at his apartment until he came back from work. So yeah, we were there. We were driving around every day for multiple hours, and we would just be in the car together, and we had no breaks from each other. There was no time to be away from each other because that's not what he wanted. He didn't want me out of his sight because he was, you can't control what's not in your sight. You can't control that person then. So as you can imagine, there was a lot of tension between the two of us. Especially on my side, because by this point there had just been a lot of emotional and verbal and mental abuse. There had been basically financial abuse because while he was working DoorDash, I was working my job until I wasn't able to work it anymore. And when I was working, he would basically claim my paycheck as his paycheck as well, because we were together. And even though, I fought back and said, I don't want to have to share my paycheck with you, that would just lead to another fight. And I had been basically conditioned into this, if I fight back, he's gonna fight harder. And, I wasn't strong enough at the time to continue fighting. So one night in particular, we were driving, and he had a really bad tendency to just bring up past history and kind of try to poke me or taunt me or try to get a reaction out of me just so we could fight, because there was nothing else we would do. We would just fight all the time. And there's one night in particular where he was poking extremely persistently about one topic in particular, and I just had enough. I started yelling at him. I started screaming, and I got very upset. I couldn't take it anymore, and I let my mouth run and run and run. And at one point, he just got so fed up with what I was saying that he punched me. And he began yelling at me and spitting on me, and he choked me out. And I just remember the first time he punched me that I saw this like light. And I'm not trying to be dramatic. I remember so vividly the first time he punched me, I saw this like bright light when my eyes closed. And it hurt so much. So at that point, I really should have just said, that's enough. That's not okay. Don't lay hands on me like that. And I realize it can be contradicting because I slapped him across the face because he called me derogatory names. And I'm not trying to justify that what I did was okay. I'm not saying you can go around slapping people and that it's, there's not going to be consequences. It's just that, you can't go around punching people and choking them and spitting on them and not expect consequences either. But instead of leaving, I stayed again. I let myself believe that it was just an accident, that he wouldn't do it again, that I deserved it. I should have kept my mouth shut. And that was my mentality, which only fed and fueled his actions and reactions to me, because he's realizing that I'm in this mentality, this state of mind where I'm thinking, well, if I fight back, he's just gonna hit me. So he realizes he has power and leverage over me because he is physically bigger than me, physically stronger than me. And he knew that he could get away with these things and I wouldn't do anything about it. I believe a few months before he and I broke up, we went through this experience together, which was I was on birth control pills at the time, and he threw them away without me knowing. And when he told me that he had thrown them away, it was too late because I couldn't go back to the garbage and just pick them out. Like, they had been thrown away in the dumpster. And he was refusing to let me go tell my mom, and refusing me to let me get more birth control, because his intention was to get me pregnant. Because I think that was just more power. That was another way he could prevent me from leaving. Even if we were to break up, there would still be that bond of, hey, we have a child together and we have to, work on this, or one of us has to claim custody. I was 19, 20 at the time, and I understand that there are some people that are able to support a child and that their lifestyle allows them, or their practices, whatever you want to call it, they'll get pregnant and they will keep the child, and I am respecting that by all means. Me personally, I was not ready to have a child, and I didn't feel it was fair to bring a child into this world where I was not going to be ready to support it financially, emotionally. We weren't living on our own, and I didn't want to affect my family with a child that I'm not able to take care of, and then that turns into them having to take care of the child for me, with me, which is something they did not sign up for. So you know, I get the pregnancy test. I come back and I'm pregnant, and I tell him, and he's like, "Oh, that's great. That's congratulations, us." And at that point, I was able to tell my mom. I don't remember exactly how it all panned out, but eventually I told my mom. And part of me was very there was a lot of confliction because I have always wanted to be a mom. I've always wanted to have my own kids, and knowing that I was pregnant and feeling all this pressure and having him under my skin made me think kind of in a distorted way, where I was very adamant about saying I do want the baby and I want to keep the baby and we're going to have the baby. And eventually my mom was like, well, you know what, I can't support you on this because that's a whole other human being. And she's telling me straight up, you can't afford a child. And eventually I figured out, I came to my senses. I said, yeah, you're right. So eventually I was able to convince him to take me to a Planned Parenthood, because I said, if you're not going to take me, then I'm going to have my mom take me, because I can't have a baby. And it was definitely one of the most hardest things I've had to do in my life, because I go into Planned Parenthood, and when I see the doctor, they're questioning me about my pregnancy, and then they have to check that there's something to get rid of. They have to check that I'm far enough into the pregnancy for them to actually, what type of abortion I can have, if it's a surgical abortion or if it's just simply taking a pill. And I was about 10 weeks or earlier, so I was able to take the pill. So I get the pill, and I come home with him. And at that point, I'm already crying. I'm already sobbing. I'm already feeling horrible because, it's a lot to go through, especially because, they found what was going to be my baby. And, I had to get rid of it. And, as if going through an abortion by itself isn't hard enough. And my boyfriend at the time telling me how horrible I am. And he's just telling me, we could have had something good, you got rid of it, you're horrible. You wouldn't be crying if you had just kept the baby. So months pass. The abortion's still on my mind, but I was getting stronger day by day. I was starting to just get really fed up with how I was being treated. And I remember one day we woke up and I looked at him and I just said, I can't do this anymore. I can't continue having you hit me. I can't continue lying to my mom about where are these black eyes, where these bruises, why there are marks on my neck. from where you choked me, and I can't continue ignoring my friends who are worried that, you know, they don't know what's happening. I don't even really know what's happening. I told them, you know, I can't continue doing this. And, you know, I'm crying at this point because as much of a relief it is to let go of something that's hurting you, there is still grief. And even if you're doing the right thing, sometimes it can hurt. So, you know, we break up, and from that point on, it's just been healing. It's just been me trying to heal from everything that happened within that year. So I'm sharing this story because I know that there are people out there who are in the same situation where they're scared, where they feel like there's no escape and there's no hope, because that's the exact situation I was in. And I realized that not everyone's situation is going to be as easy as mine, because I was fortunate in the fact where I was not bound to this guy financially, with a child, with, you know, a house over my head. It's not like we were bound in that way, because I still have my family. Regardless of the fact that I talked to them consistently for a year, they're still my family, and they were still going to be there for me, just like my friends. And so part of me sharing this story is not just because I want to, you know, let others know that they're not alone, but also just to say, like, you know, it's not easy. And I think that what people who haven't experienced it from, and hopefully you never have to experience what happened to me, is that it's a lot harder than just, why doesn't she just leave? Why doesn't he just leave? Why don't they just leave? Why don't they just pick up all their stuff and go? Because, you know, like I said, sometimes it's not always that easy. So going into year 2021, I think one of my goals is to continue to practice self-love, self-care, and forgiving myself for what happened in the past. So before I end this video, I'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you that are supporting me right now, that is, you know, that listened to the whole video and listened to my story. You know, like everyone else, I'm just hoping this year brings good fortune and, you know, something better than what we were left off with. Here's 2021. Thanks, guys. Stay safe, stay happy.